The scale of American mobilization in World War II was unprecedented. Within months, factories, railroads, and ports transformed from peacetime production into a war machine capable of supplying millions of soldiers across oceans. The challenge was immense. Steel, fuel, and ammunition had to flow continuously to Europe, the Pacific, and North Africa. Every movement required foresight, coordination, and precision. Logistical planners faced the monumental task of connecting raw materials to production and production to battlefield across thousands of miles of ocean, all while enemy forces sought to disrupt every supply line. From the docks of New York to the steel mills of Pittsburgh, logistics became the lifeblood of war. Cargo ships, trucks, and trains became extensions of the battlefield, each carrying the tools, weapons, and sustenance necessary for victory. Without this intricate network, soldiers on distant shores would have faced starvation, exposure, or inadequate armament. Logistics was not merely support. It was the decisive factor in ensuring that men and machines could operate at peak effectiveness under extreme conditions. The United States faced a complex industrial puzzle. Factories had to be retooled at breathtaking speed, producing planes, tanks, ships, and weapons that met exacting military specifications. Engineers, laborers, and managers collaborated to increase output, often working around the clock. The shift from civilian to military production was not seamless. It required innovation, problem-solving, and a willingness to push the boundaries of technology and manpower. Every component, from rivets to engines, was part of a chain that determined battlefield success. Central to this effort was the coordination of supply chains. Raw materials had to be mined, refined, and transported to factories, then assembled into finished goods and shipped to ports. From there, convoys and cargo ships carried these resources to distant theaters of operation, where railroads, trucks, and depots redistributed them to the front lines. Each link was vulnerable to disruption, requiring meticulous planning, redundancy, and risk management. The complexity of this system made logistics a silent but omnipresent force in the war. The human dimension of logistics was enormous. Millions of workers, many of them women and minorities entering industry for the first time, powered the war effort. Shipbuilders, machinists, and truck drivers became as critical to victory as soldiers on the front lines. Their labor demanded skill, endurance, and precision. A single error could disrupt operations thousands of miles away. Recognition of this human contribution became central to understanding how the United States sustained such a massive war effort without faltering. Innovation extended beyond factories. Ports, warehouses, and transportation hubs were redesigned to handle the sheer volume of wartime traffic. Cranes, forklifts, and conveyor systems accelerated loading and unloading, while standardized shipping containers improved efficiency. Planning had to anticipate tides, weather, enemy action, and scheduling conflicts. Every innovation reflected the understanding that logistics could be optimized just like combat operations, transforming mundane infrastructure into decisive tools of war. The logistics network also demanded strategic foresight. Commanders had to anticipate needs months in advance, calculating ammunition, fuel, and food consumption for operations yet to be launched. Forward supply bases were established on remote islands and coastlines, creating a chain of sustenance that enabled rapid advances. This required unprecedented predictive capability, ensuring that forces could maintain momentum without pausing for replenishment, often under the threat of enemy interdiction. Ultimately, logistics transformed the American military machine into a force capable of operating on multiple continents simultaneously. Every victory in Europe, Africa, and the Pacific relied on the continuous flow of men, machines, and supplies. Logistics was not a background function. It was the engine that powered combat, turning industrial capacity into strategic advantage. Without it, even the bravest soldiers and the most advanced weapons would have been stranded, ineffective, and vulnerable. The first months of mobilization revealed the immense challenge of scale. Factories were overwhelmed, raw materials were rationed, and transportation networks strained under unprecedented demand. Yet the United States rapidly adapted. Engineers redesigned assembly lines for mass production, breaking complex tasks into manageable segments. Shipyards employed innovative modular construction techniques, allowing entire warships to be assembled in record time. These innovations ensured that production could match the demands of multiple simultaneous theaters of war. Railroads became critical arteries of war. From coal fields to factories, from factories to ports, rail systems moved vast quantities of raw materials and finished goods. Scheduling, maintenance, and coordination with civilian transportation networks required precision. Delays could ripple across the supply chain, threatening operations thousands of miles away. The ability to move resources efficiently became a decisive factor, demonstrating that victory depended on speed and reliability as much as firepower. Ports became logistical hubs of extraordinary complexity. Thousands of tons of equipment had to be loaded, unloaded, and transferred daily. Cranes, docks, and storage facilities were upgraded to handle the constant flow. Teams of longshoremen, often working under harsh conditions, coordinated with military planners to prioritize critical cargo. Convoys had to depart on schedule, escorted by naval vessels to protect against submarines and air attack. The success of every frontline operation depended on these silent, tireless logistical efforts. Shipping logistics was equally vital in the Atlantic and Pacific. Convoys crossed vast oceans, carrying tanks, ammunition, vehicles, and food. Submarine threats demanded careful routing, escort strategies, and anti-submarine tactics. Ships were modified for speed, durability, and defensive capability. Every voyage carried the weight of lives and strategy, a reminder that logistics extended the battlefield across oceans as effectively as any artillery or aircraft. Fuel became the lifeblood of operations. Trucks, tanks, ships, and planes required vast quantities of gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel. Pipelines, tankers, and storage facilities were constructed to meet this demand. The logistical challenge of supplying fuel dictated strategy, influencing the pace and scope of operations in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. Without reliable fuel distribution, advances would stall, convoys would slow, and entire campaigns could falter. Personnel management was another critical factor. Millions of soldiers, sailors, and airmen depended on food, clothing, and medical care. Commissaries, hospitals, and supply depots had to function seamlessly. Meals, rations, and medical supplies had to reach troops in diverse climates, from the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of the Pacific, without interruption. These systems required precise forecasting, rigorous organization, and flexibility to adapt to changing conditions on the battlefield. Innovation extended to vehicles and transport. Trucks, amphibious landing craft, and cargo planes were designed to move men and equipment efficiently. Maintenance teams and mechanics ensured that machines remained operational under extreme conditions. Spare parts, tools, and fuel were stockpiled strategically, enabling units to recover from damage quickly. The logistics network was not passive, it was actively sustaining the combat power of the American military. Through meticulous planning, relentless innovation, and human ingenuity, the United States created a supply chain capable of sustaining global warfare. From the factories of the Midwest to the ports of the coasts, from rail yards to landing beaches, logistics became the invisible backbone of victory. Every soldier, sailor, and airman depended on this network, and its efficiency and reliability ensured that America could fight anywhere in the world, at any scale. Shipbuilding became one of the most extraordinary logistical achievements of the war. Massive yards along the east and west coasts, including those in Philadelphia, Seattle, and Norfolk, were transformed into factories of speed and precision. Liberty ships, once built in months, were now launched in mere weeks, with modular construction allowing different sections to be assembled simultaneously. This mass production created a continuous flow of vessels capable of transporting troops, vehicles, fuel, and supplies across the Atlantic and Pacific, sustaining operations that spanned the globe. Airplane production was equally transformative. Factories in the Midwest and South produced bombers, fighters, and transport planes at unprecedented rates. Workers coordinated with military engineers to ensure every aircraft met exacting standards while increasing output exponentially. Every plane delivered represented not just firepower but the ability to project force, supply forward positions, and maintain air superiority. Logistics ensured that these aircraft reached the front lines ready to fight, often across vast distances of ocean or hostile territory. Rail networks were expanded and modernized to handle wartime pressures. Tracks were reinforced, locomotives repaired, and schedules synchronized to move raw materials and finished products efficiently. Trains delivered steel, coal, and machinery from inland factories to ports, while simultaneously distributing supplies to forward depots in preparation for overseas shipments. Without these rail arteries, the factory's output would have been stranded, unable to sustain the growing demands of global warfare. Convoys became the lifeblood of overseas logistics. Ships traveling in groups, escorted by destroyers and later supported by aircraft, protected precious cargo from submarine and aerial attacks. Convoys carried everything from Sherman tanks to ammunition to medical supplies, ensuring that U.S. forces could strike with sustained power. Each convoy represented a feat of coordination and planning, with precise timing and routing necessary to minimize exposure to enemy threats. Fuel logistics required unprecedented planning and infrastructure. Petroleum was essential for planes, tanks, ships, and trucks. Refineries ramped up production, storage depots multiplied, and tanker ships transported millions of barrels across oceans. Pipelines, both temporary and permanent, were installed in theaters of operation to maintain supply continuity. Without this vast, coordinated effort, mechanized units would have been immobilized and air campaigns grounded before they could achieve strategic objectives. The human element of logistics was immense. Millions of workers, many of them women entering industrial work for the first time, operated factories, ports, and transportation networks with tireless efficiency. Their labor, dedication, and ingenuity were vital to sustaining the war effort. Every rivet hammered, every crate loaded, and every vehicle maintained was a direct contribution to victory, highlighting that logistics was not simply machinery. It was powered by people. Innovation in storage and movement was essential. Warehouses and depots were restructured to hold enormous quantities of supplies, while cranes, forklifts, and conveyance systems accelerated operations. Standardized packaging and inventory control minimized waste and ensured the right equipment reached the right units on time. Logistics evolved into a dynamic, adaptive system capable of responding to shifting operational needs, often in real time. The integration of logistics into strategy became central to military planning. Commanders could launch operations confidently, knowing that supply lines were secure and adaptable. The success of campaigns, from Normandy to the Pacific Islands, depended on this careful orchestration. Logistics was no longer a supporting function. It was a decisive force multiplier, shaping strategy, operational reach, and ultimately, victory. The establishment of forward supply bases was a critical innovation. In North Africa, Italy, and the Pacific, bases were constructed rapidly to support advancing troops. Engineers and logisticians built airfields, warehouses, fuel depots, and docking facilities, enabling the military to sustain momentum without pausing for resupply. These forward bases were the linchpins of operational strategy, allowing forces to maintain offensive pressure while minimizing vulnerability. Shipping losses to submarines and air attacks required constant adaptation. Convoy tactics evolved, incorporating zigzag courses, layered escort formations, and sonar-equipped destroyers to detect enemy submarines. Intelligence on enemy movements, combined with real-time communications, reduced risks and ensured that supplies continued to flow. The interplay of planning, technology, and human vigilance ensured that even under threat, logistics remained reliable. The integration of transportation modes was vital. Cargo arriving at ports was moved by rail, trucks, and amphibious vehicles to frontline positions. Timing and coordination were critical. A delay in one segment could stall operations elsewhere. Logistics officers coordinated schedules, routes, and priorities with precision, ensuring seamless continuity from factory floor to battlefield. The efficiency of this system allowed U.S. forces to operate at a scale and pace unmatched by any adversary. Aircraft and vehicles were maintained with meticulous care. Spare parts, fuel, and mechanics were organized to ensure that planes could fly and vehicles could move without interruption. Maintenance units accompanied forward troops, often working under fire, to repair equipment damaged in combat or harsh environments. This attention to detail ensured that the operational tempo of American forces could be sustained indefinitely, providing a decisive edge over enemies with more limited industrial bases. Medical logistics was equally sophisticated. Field hospitals, casualty evacuation, and supply of medical equipment were coordinated to save lives and maintain troop morale. Forward units received blood, surgical equipment, and medications efficiently, while evacuation chains transported the wounded safely to permanent medical facilities. This system demonstrated that logistics extended beyond weapons and machinery. It safeguarded human life, enabling soldiers to fight with confidence. Communications and planning tools were integral to logistics. Maps, codes, and radio networks allowed commanders to monitor shipments, anticipate shortages, and redirect supplies as needed. The synchronization of data across theaters enabled rapid decision-making and reduced bottlenecks. In essence, logistics became a predictive science, capable of adapting to evolving operational demands and enemy actions. Wartime production created a feedback loop of improvement. Problems in the field informed factory processes, while innovations in manufacturing influenced operational strategy. Modular ship construction, prefabricated airfields, and standardized vehicles were direct responses to battlefield requirements. This synergy between production and operational need exemplified the sophistication and adaptability of the American war effort. Ultimately, logistics was the invisible backbone of the U.S. military machine. Every successful landing, armored advance, and aerial campaign depended on this vast, coordinated network. Soldiers fought, but factories, railroads, ports, and ships enabled them to do so anywhere in the world. America's logistical prowess became both a strategic weapon and a decisive factor in victory. The role of American industry in sustaining global war efforts cannot be overstated. Factories, once producing consumer goods, were retooled to mass-produce tanks, aircraft, ships, and artillery. Engineers and managers coordinated to increase efficiency while maintaining quality, ensuring that every piece of equipment functioned in combat conditions. This industrial surge, powered by a workforce that often worked around the clock, became a decisive factor in the Allies' ability to sustain operations across multiple continents simultaneously. Shipyards along the east and west coasts became hives of unrelenting activity. Modular construction methods allowed sections of ships to be built simultaneously in different locations and then assembled at the dock. The result was a dramatic acceleration of production schedules. Liberty ships that once took months to build were now launched in weeks. This ability to rapidly replace losses and expand the fleet gave the Allies strategic flexibility, allowing convoys to continue supplying troops without interruption. Rail networks formed the veins of America's logistical system. Raw materials were transported to factories, finished products to ports, and finally deployed to theaters of war. Rail workers, engineers, and schedulers coordinated complex networks to prevent delays. Each train carried not only goods, but the assurance that soldiers on distant battlefields would receive the equipment, food, and fuel necessary to fight. The efficiency of this system exemplified the precision and scale of American logistical planning. Ports and loading facilities evolved into sophisticated hubs. Thousands of tons of supplies moved daily, with dockworkers, engineers, and military planners orchestrating the flow. Cranes and conveyor systems reduced manual labor and accelerated loading, while careful scheduling ensured convoys departed on time. Ports became the interface between industrial output and combat power, translating American production into operational capability. Fuel logistics were critical to mechanized warfare. Tanks, trucks, ships, and planes all relied on a continuous flow of petroleum. Refineries expanded capacity, storage depots multiplied, and tanker fleets crossed dangerous seas. Pipelines were built in theaters of operation to reduce dependency on surface transport. Fuel became a strategic resource, determining the tempo of operations and the reach of mechanized forces. Maintenance and repair networks were deployed alongside combat units. Forward repair depots and mobile workshops ensured that vehicles and aircraft could be returned to service quickly. Spare parts were stockpiled strategically, enabling rapid recovery from damage in harsh operational environments. This continuous support allowed troops to maintain momentum and reduce the attritional impact of extended combat. Medical and food logistics sustained human endurance. Field hospitals, supply chains, and ration systems ensured that troops remained fed, hydrated, and healthy. Vaccinations, antiseptics, and surgical supplies were distributed efficiently to prevent disease and treat injuries. Logistics safeguarded not only equipment, but human life, reinforcing morale and combat effectiveness. In the end, logistics transformed the U.S. military into a force capable of global projection. Factories, transportation networks, and supply chains worked in unison to sustain operations across oceans and continents. Soldiers, ships, and planes were effective not only because of their skill, but because logistics ensured they could function continuously and reliably in the harshest conditions of modern warfare. Convoy systems became the lifelines of the Atlantic and Pacific campaigns. Ships carried tanks, artillery, ammunition, food, and fuel across thousands of miles, often under threat from submarines, aircraft, and mines. Naval escorts, anti-submarine tactics, and intelligence coordination minimized losses. Each convoy was a complex operation requiring precision and vigilance. Any disruption could delay frontline operations or endanger lives. The success of these convoys illustrated that logistics extended the battlefield across oceans as effectively as any frontline maneuver. The integration of air transport added a new dimension to logistics. Cargo planes enabled rapid delivery of critical supplies, bypassing enemy-controlled seas or difficult terrain. Air transport provided flexibility, speed, and reach, allowing commanders to reinforce positions or deliver emergency supplies to forward units. The combination of sea, land, and air transport created a logistical network of unprecedented scale and sophistication. Strategic foresight shaped the deployment of logistics. Forward supply bases were established to sustain campaigns across Europe, Africa, and the Pacific. Engineers constructed airfields, ports, and depots on remote islands and coasts, often under enemy fire. These bases served as nodes in a global network, ensuring that forces could advance without interruption. The placement and maintenance of these hubs were as critical as the combat operations they supported. Manpower logistics became equally important. Millions of soldiers, sailors, and airmen required consistent food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. Commissaries, warehouses, and supply depots functioned with precision to ensure frontline troops remained operational. Morale depended as much on reliable supply as on victories in combat, demonstrating that logistics directly influenced both human performance and strategic outcomes. Innovation in packaging and transport revolutionized efficiency. Standardized crates, pallets, and containers allowed for rapid loading and unloading, while careful inventory management reduced waste and errors. Ports and warehouses became centers of streamlined efficiency, transforming the movement of goods into a precise science. These innovations allowed America to sustain multiple theaters simultaneously without logistical breakdown. Technology supported logistics at every level. Mechanized cranes, forklifts, trucks, and conveyor systems accelerated the movement of goods. Communications networks coordinated shipments across continents. Engineers and planners adapted tools and techniques continuously, ensuring that supply chains remained resilient under pressure. These technological innovations became force multipliers, enabling the American military machine to function at maximum efficiency. Enemy threats underscored the importance of resilience. U-boat campaigns in the Atlantic and Japanese submarines in the Pacific challenged supply lines continuously. Countermeasures, convoy tactics, and intelligence coordination mitigated these threats, but the danger demanded constant vigilance and adaptability. The ability to sustain supply under fire demonstrated the ingenuity, discipline, and coordination that defined American logistics. The cumulative impact of these efforts was transformative. From raw materials to the front lines, logistics enabled the projection of military power on a global scale. Factories, ports, convoys, and depots operated as a cohesive system, ensuring that combat forces were never idle for want of resources. Logistics had become the greatest force multiplier in history, sustaining operations that spanned oceans and continents. Aircraft production reached staggering levels, fueling both combat and supply operations. Fighters, bombers, and transport planes were manufactured in massive quantities, often with interchangeable parts to streamline repair and maintenance. The production system adapted to rapidly evolving technological requirements, integrating new designs and modifications without halting output. Every aircraft delivered represented both power projection and logistical mastery, extending the reach and capability of U.S. forces worldwide. Shipbuilding innovations were equally remarkable. Modular construction, prefabricated hulls, and assembly line techniques reduced construction time dramatically. A single Liberty ship could now be launched in weeks rather than months. These vessels became the backbone of supply convoys, enabling the movement of tanks, ammunition, and essential materials to distant theaters. The scale and speed of shipbuilding exemplified the marriage of industrial capacity and strategic necessity. Fuel pipelines, storage depots, and tanker fleets ensured that mechanized forces could operate without interruption. Gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel were distributed efficiently across continents and oceans. Without these networks, tanks, aircraft, and trucks would have been immobilized, severely limiting operational reach. Fuel logistics became a critical determinant of strategy, influencing the tempo and feasibility of large-scale campaigns. Rail and trucking networks were coordinated with precision. Supplies leaving factories were routed to ports and bases with meticulous scheduling. Delays were minimized through careful monitoring and contingency planning. This level of coordination allowed frontline units to receive the exact resources needed at the right time, ensuring uninterrupted operations even in the face of enemy interference. Medical and food logistics sustained human endurance. Forward hospitals, surgical teams, and field kitchens were integrated into supply chains, providing soldiers with life-saving care and nourishment. Medical evacuations were coordinated across air and land networks, preserving lives and maintaining morale. The system demonstrated that logistics extended beyond equipment, safeguarding the human capital essential for sustained combat. Convoy security became a central focus. Naval escorts, anti-submarine tactics, and intelligence support minimized losses, allowing supply ships to cross perilous waters safely. Each convoy represented a triumph of coordination and planning, ensuring that vast quantities of material reached distant fronts intact. The success of these operations demonstrated the essential role of protection and vigilance in logistics. Innovation in storage, handling, and transport accelerated the flow of supplies. Warehouses were reorganized, cranes and forklifts introduced, and inventory systems standardized. Standardized containers and packaging reduced errors and increased speed. These advances transformed logistics into a highly efficient, adaptable system capable of sustaining global military operations. By the end of the war, the United States had created a military machine whose effectiveness was inseparable from its logistical foundation. Every soldier, ship, and plane owed its operational capability to the relentless flow of supplies, maintenance, and planning. Logistics had become the hidden engine of victory, turning industrial might into decisive combat power. The role of logistics in sustaining amphibious operations was crucial. Landings in North Africa, Normandy, and the Pacific required an uninterrupted flow of equipment, ammunition, and personnel. Specialized landing craft, portable docks, and pre-staged supplies ensured that troops could advance immediately upon hitting the beach. Every detail, from ration distribution to artillery emplacement, depended on meticulous planning, proving that logistics was inseparable from tactical success. Supply convoys faced constant threats from submarines, aircraft, and mines. Countermeasures evolved alongside enemy tactics, incorporating improved sonar, depth charges, and aerial patrols. The ability to protect shipments ensured that frontline units could maintain momentum, while losses were quickly replaced. The logistical network became a dynamic system of offense and defense, sustaining the military machine under constant pressure. Medical logistics ensured that injured soldiers could survive and return to combat. Field hospitals, surgical teams, and evacuation protocols were coordinated across theaters, allowing the wounded to receive timely care. Blood supplies, medications, and equipment were transported to forward positions, creating a lifeline for human endurance. Logistics thus preserved the most critical resource, the men and women who fought the war. Fuel and ammunition distribution shaped operational capability. Tanks, trucks, aircraft, and ships relied on precise delivery schedules. Pipelines, tankers, and depots ensured that supply lines could meet the demands of fast-moving campaigns. Any disruption could halt advances, delay offensives, and cost lives, underscoring the strategic importance of maintaining continuous flows. Innovation under pressure was constant. Engineers developed modular shipping methods, prefabricated airfields, and mechanized port equipment. Maintenance teams adapted to harsh conditions, repairing vehicles and aircraft in the field. These innovations were not theoretical. They were implemented under fire, demonstrating the extraordinary integration of human ingenuity and logistical planning. The human workforce was the engine of logistics. Women in factories, dock workers, mechanics, and drivers ensured that the machinery of war ran smoothly. Their skill, endurance, and dedication made industrial output actionable on the battlefield. Each worker, often unsung, contributed directly to the projection of American power, proving that logistics relied on people as much as on machines. Strategic foresight allowed logistics to anticipate operational needs. Planners projected requirements months in advance, preparing for fuel, ammunition, and food across multiple theaters. Forward depots were established on islands and coasts to sustain campaigns, enabling rapid advances without the risk of supply shortages. The predictive nature of logistics became a key determinant of operational tempo and strategic flexibility. Ultimately, logistics turned American industry into a weapon as decisive as any bomb or tank. Factories, transport networks, ports, and convoys formed an interconnected system capable of sustaining war across continents and oceans. Every victory, from the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific, was made possible by this invisible, yet overwhelmingly powerful, network. The scale of America's logistical achievement was unprecedented. Millions of tons of supplies were shipped across oceans, coordinated through an intricate system of ports, warehouses, and transport routes. Planning had to consider weather, tides, enemy action, and operational priorities. This complexity required continuous adaptation, yet the system functioned with remarkable efficiency, demonstrating that logistics could operate as a force multiplier on a global scale. Railroads delivered raw materials from mines and factories to ports, ensuring continuous production cycles. Coordinating trains, scheduling departures, and maintaining track and locomotives became an operational science. Even minor disruptions could cascade into shortages on the front lines, highlighting the precision required to sustain a modern military. Logistics was no longer background support. It was central to strategic success. Aircraft logistics enabled rapid reinforcement and resupply. Transport planes carried critical supplies to forward units and evacuated the wounded to safety. Air mobility extended operational reach, allowing commanders to respond swiftly to changing conditions. The combination of sea and air transport created redundancy and resilience, ensuring that supply lines remained intact despite enemy interference. Shipbuilding innovations allowed fleets to expand at a scale never before imagined. Modular hulls, standardized components, and assembly line techniques enabled rapid replacement of losses. Liberty ships, troop carriers, and tankers transformed industrial output into operational capability, making America's supply network virtually unstoppable. Each vessel became a floating node in a global logistical system. Maintenance networks ensured operational continuity. Forward repair depots, spare parts distribution, and specialized crews kept vehicles, aircraft, and ships functional under extreme conditions. This allowed mechanized forces to maintain momentum, adapt to battlefield damage, and sustain extended campaigns. The resilience of logistics became as important as the skill of soldiers themselves. Fuel distribution was a cornerstone of strategy. Without pipelines, depots, and tanker convoys, mechanized operations would have stalled. Strategic planning ensured that fuel supplies matched operational tempo, enabling rapid advances, prolonged offensives, and flexibility in maneuver. The ability to maintain energy flow for forces worldwide became a decisive factor in victory. Personnel logistics maintained the human engine of the military. Food, clothing, ammunition, and medical care had to reach millions of troops scattered across continents and islands. Supply systems ensured that soldiers could operate at peak effectiveness, sustaining morale and resilience in the harshest conditions. Every combat action was directly enabled by this invisible support network. Through these coordinated efforts, logistics became the ultimate enabler of military power. The American war machine operated not just because of weapons or bravery, but because of an intricate system capable of sustaining global operations. Logistics had become both the backbone and the brain of victory, turning industrial capacity into an unstoppable strategic force. Forward planning in logistics shaped the trajectory of the war. Military planners projected requirements months ahead, anticipating the demands of future campaigns. Depots, airfields, and supply routes were prepositioned, enabling sustained offensives without pause. This predictive approach allowed commanders to maneuver freely, confident that supplies would meet operational demands, even across thousands of miles of hostile territory. The human element in logistics was vast and complex. Factory workers, dock hands, truck drivers, and mechanics formed a network of millions, keeping equipment functional and supplies flowing. Their labor ensured that industrial output became combat power. Without this human effort, even the most sophisticated weapons and vehicles would have remained idle, demonstrating that logistics was powered by people as much as machinery. Port efficiency became a strategic advantage. Cranes, forklifts, warehouses, and conveyor systems accelerated loading and unloading, reducing turnaround times for convoys. The synchronization of multiple ports allowed global operations to continue seamlessly. The result was an American military capable of sustaining simultaneous campaigns across multiple theaters. Technological adaptation was constant. Engineers designed vehicles, ships, and aircraft to be compatible with supply networks, and modular systems allowed rapid assembly and repair. Logistics teams adapted in real time to operational realities, ensuring that troops always received what they needed when they needed it. This integration of technology and planning became a defining feature of the American war effort. Convoys, protected by naval escorts and coordinated through intelligence networks, overcame enemy threats with remarkable efficiency. Anti-submarine tactics, air cover, and convoy scheduling minimized losses, allowing supplies to reach distant fronts intact. The effectiveness of these operations highlighted the strategic power of coordinated logistics. Fuel and ammunition distribution dictated the tempo of operations. Tank columns, mechanized infantry, and aircraft depended on precise delivery schedules. Disruptions could halt entire campaigns, so redundancy and contingency planning were critical. Logistics became a form of operational leverage, shaping strategy and enabling sustained offensive action. Medical logistics ensured that soldiers recovered from wounds and remained combat-ready. Evacuation chains, field hospitals, and supply of medications and blood saved countless lives. The survival of soldiers depended on this system, reinforcing the notion that logistics was as much about sustaining human capability as it was about moving equipment. Ultimately, logistics transformed industrial might into global military power. Factories, transportation networks, supply chains, and human effort combined to create a machine capable of sustained worldwide operations. Victory in World War II was not merely the product of battles. It was the result of a logistics system operating at unparalleled scale and sophistication. The Pacific Theater presented unique logistical challenges. Vast distances, remote islands, and hostile environments required careful planning and innovation. Supply lines had to traverse thousands of miles of open ocean, often under threat from submarines and kamikaze attacks. Forward bases were constructed rapidly, providing fuel, ammunition, and repair facilities for advancing forces. Every success in the Pacific, from Guadalcanal to Iwo Jima, depended on the ability to sustain combat operations across these immense distances. Island hopping demanded specialized equipment and transport. Amphibious landing craft, pontoon bridges, and portable docks enabled troops to disembark under fire while supplies followed immediately. Engineers and logisticians worked tirelessly to ensure that fuel, rations, and ammunition reached troops at the front, often improvising solutions in difficult terrain. The effectiveness of American forces was inseparable from this adaptive logistical support. Air logistics was critical in the Pacific. Transport aircraft delivered supplies to forward airfields and evacuated the wounded, often navigating hazardous weather and enemy fire. These operations extended operational reach and allowed commanders to maintain pressure on Japanese positions. Air transport became a force multiplier, ensuring that even remote units could be supplied efficiently. Shipbuilding innovations allowed rapid replacement of losses and expansion of fleet capacity. Liberty ships, tankers, and troop transports maintained a steady flow of material and personnel. Convoys protected by naval escorts transported supplies across treacherous waters. Logistics ensured that mechanized and naval forces could continue operations without pause, reinforcing the strategic advantage of mobility and endurance. Fuel distribution remained a cornerstone of operational planning. Pipelines, storage depots, and tanker fleets enabled mechanized units, aircraft, and naval vessels to sustain operations continuously. Precise calculations determined quantities needed at each forward base, and contingency reserves were maintained to address unforeseen delays or losses. This ensured uninterrupted operational momentum. Personnel logistics maintained the human element of the military machine. Food, clothing, medical care, and equipment had to reach millions of troops scattered across oceans and islands. Systems were established to track, prioritize, and deliver these necessities efficiently. The well-being of soldiers depended entirely on this invisible network, highlighting the moral and practical significance of logistics. Maintenance and repair networks kept combat power operational. Mobile workshops, forward repair depots, and spare parts supply enabled vehicles and aircraft to continue functioning despite intense wear and battlefield damage. Every repair extended operational reach, allowing units to maintain effectiveness over extended campaigns. Ultimately, the Pacific campaigns demonstrated the transformative power of logistics. Operations succeeded not simply because of courage or weaponry, but because industrial output, transport networks, and planning converged to sustain global operations. Logistics had become the decisive factor in American strategic capability, enabling victories that reshaped the war. In Europe, logistics dictated the pace and success of Allied operations. The Normandy landings exemplified the complexity and scale of the effort. Thousands of ships, trucks, and aircraft transported men, vehicles, and supplies across the English Channel. Engineers constructed temporary harbors and repaired damaged ports, ensuring continuous delivery of resources. The ability to sustain a foothold in France depended entirely on the uninterrupted flow of logistics. Railroads and trucking networks coordinated with ports to move equipment and supplies inland. Forward depots stored ammunition, food, and fuel, ready for distribution as units advanced. Each movement was calculated to minimize delays and maximize operational flexibility. Logistics became a strategic enabler, allowing commanders to maintain offensive pressure while minimizing vulnerability. Fuel and ammunition consumption was meticulously calculated. Tanks, artillery, and aircraft required precise quantities to operate at full capacity. Supply officers monitored usage, anticipating needs and redistributing resources as required. This ensured that mechanized advances did not stall due to shortages and that air campaigns could continue unimpeded. Medical logistics preserved human combat power. Field hospitals, surgical units, and evacuation systems ensured wounded soldiers survived and, when possible, returned to duty. Blood supplies, medications, and equipment were delivered to forward positions with precision, reducing mortality and sustaining morale. Logistics thus safeguarded the most valuable resource, human life. Innovation in transport and handling accelerated operations. Cranes, forklifts, and conveyor systems optimized port efficiency, while modular packaging and standardized containers facilitated rapid movement. Forward units received critical supplies with minimal delay, demonstrating that logistics was a dynamic, adaptive system integral to operational success. The human workforce powered this system. Dock workers, railway engineers, mechanics, and drivers worked tirelessly to ensure continuous supply. Their labor, often under hazardous conditions, enabled frontline forces to operate at full effectiveness. The contribution of these individuals was as vital as the actions of soldiers in combat. Strategic foresight enabled sustained campaigns. Anticipating future operational requirements, planners pre-positioned supplies, constructed depots, and maintained contingency reserves. This predictive capability allowed Allied forces to strike decisively, confident that logistics would support each maneuver. Ultimately, logistics in Europe demonstrated the integration of industrial capacity, planning, and human effort. Every advance, every victory, depended on this invisible yet decisive network, proving that operational success was inseparable from the ability to sustain forces over vast distances and prolonged campaigns. The integration of global logistics networks was unmatched in history. Supply chains connected raw materials, factories, ports, railroads, and frontline units across continents and oceans. Coordination required constant communication, tracking, and adjustment. Intelligence and planning ensured that supplies reached the right units at the right time, making logistics a strategic weapon as critical as any combat force. In the Pacific, forward bases extended operational reach. Airfields, fuel depots, and repair facilities enabled rapid advances across islands. Engineers and planners overcame environmental challenges, from coral reefs to volcanic terrain, ensuring that operations could proceed without interruption. Logistics became a force multiplier, allowing troops to engage the enemy with sustained momentum. Convoys and shipping networks operated under continuous threat. Submarines, aircraft, and mines challenged supply lines, demanding vigilance and adaptation. Naval escorts, convoy tactics, and intelligence coordination mitigated risks. The ability to maintain the flow of supplies despite enemy interference underscored the resilience and effectiveness of American logistics. Medical logistics saved lives on a massive scale. Evacuation chains, field hospitals, and supply of medicines and surgical equipment enabled wounded soldiers to survive and return to duty. Morale and operational capability were directly linked to these systems, illustrating that logistics extended beyond material support to preserving human potential. Fuel and ammunition logistics dictated the tempo of operations. Detailed forecasting and pre-positioned reserves ensured mechanized units, artillery, and aircraft maintained combat readiness. Delays or shortages could halt offensives, emphasizing that operational success depended on the seamless functioning of supply chains. Innovation was constant. Engineers developed modular solutions for shipbuilding, airfield construction, and vehicle repair. Maintenance units adapted to challenging conditions, ensuring that equipment remained operational. The continuous improvement of logistical processes became a defining feature of American military effectiveness. The workforce remained critical. Millions of workers, factory laborers, dockhands, mechanics, and drivers ensured that industrial output translated into operational capability. Their skill and dedication made the military machine functional, proving that human effort was as decisive as technological innovation. In sum, logistics was the silent force behind every victory. It enabled strategic mobility, sustained operations, and rapid response across multiple theaters. The American military machine achieved global reach not only through weapons or bravery, but through an unparalleled system of supply, coordination, and foresight. The legacy of American logistics endures as one of the most remarkable achievements in military history. By integrating industrial capacity, transport networks, planning, and human labor, the United States created a system capable of sustaining simultaneous global campaigns. This logistical prowess made victory possible, turning factories, railroads, ports, and convoys into instruments of strategic power. Every theater of war, from the deserts of North Africa to the islands of the Pacific, depended on this infrastructure. Forward depots, supply lines, and repair networks ensured that troops had the tools, fuel, and sustenance necessary to fight and endure. The success of amphibious operations, mechanized advances, and air campaigns was inseparable from the efficiency and adaptability of logistics. The human contribution was immense. Millions of workers, engineers, dockhands, and drivers ensured that industrial output became actionable combat power. Their labor, skill, and ingenuity transformed raw materials into operational capability, proving that logistics was powered as much by people as by technology. Innovation and adaptability were constant. Engineers and logisticians developed modular construction, standardized containers, mobile repair units, and predictive supply planning. These systems ensured that forces could operate in the most remote and hostile environments, sustaining combat operations over extended campaigns. Medical and food logistics preserved human life on a massive scale. Field hospitals, evacuation chains, and ration distribution allowed soldiers to survive injury, illness, and harsh conditions. Morale and operational effectiveness depended on these systems, reinforcing the critical human dimension of logistics. Strategic foresight and coordination created redundancy and resilience. Supply lines were protected, depots prepositioned, and contingency plans developed. This allowed commanders to conduct ambitious operations with confidence, knowing that logistical support could withstand disruption, enemy interference, or unforeseen challenges. The cumulative effect was decisive. Industrial capacity, transportation networks, human labor, and innovation converged to create a military machine capable of sustained global operations. Logistics was the invisible force that enabled the projection of power, the replacement of losses, and the execution of complex strategies across multiple theaters. In the end, the story of American logistics is the story of victory itself. Factories, ports, railroads, and convoys transformed industrial might into strategic advantage. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen fought effectively because they were supported by an extraordinary system that ensured they had everything needed to succeed. Logistics built not just the greatest military machine in history, it built the foundation for victory on a global scale. The legacy of American logistics endures as one of the most remarkable achievements in military history. By integrating industrial capacity, transport networks, planning, and human labor, the United States created a system capable of sustaining simultaneous global campaigns. This logistical prowess made victory possible, turning factories, railroads, ports, and convoys into instruments of strategic power. Every theater of war, from the deserts of North Africa to the islands of the Pacific, depended on this infrastructure. Forward depots, supply lines, and repair networks ensured that troops had the tools, fuel, and sustenance necessary to fight and endure. The success of amphibious operations, mechanized advances, and air campaigns was inseparable from the efficiency and adaptability of logistics. The human contribution was immense. Millions of workers, engineers, dockhands, and drivers ensured that industrial output became actionable combat power. Their labor, skill, and ingenuity transformed raw materials into operational capability, proving that logistics was powered as much by people as by technology. Innovation and adaptability were constant. Engineers and logisticians developed modular construction, standardized containers, mobile repair units, and predictive supply planning. These systems ensured that forces could operate in the most remote and hostile environments, sustaining combat operations over extended campaigns. Medical and food logistics preserved human life on a massive scale. Field hospitals, evacuation chains, and ration distribution allowed soldiers to survive injury, illness, and harsh conditions. Morale and operational effectiveness depended on these systems, reinforcing the critical human dimension of logistics. Strategic foresight and coordination created redundancy and resilience. Supply lines were protected, depots prepositioned, and contingency plans developed. This allowed commanders to conduct ambitious operations with confidence, knowing that logistical support could withstand disruption, enemy interference, or unforeseen challenges. The cumulative effect was decisive. Industrial capacity, transportation networks, human labor, and innovation converged to create a military machine capable of sustained global operations. Logistics was the invisible force that enabled the projection of power, the replacement of losses, and the execution of complex strategies across multiple theaters. In the end, the story of American logistics is the story of victory itself. Factories, ports, railroads, and convoys transformed industrial might into strategic advantage. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen fought effectively because they were supported by an extraordinary system that ensured they had everything needed to succeed. Logistics built not just the greatest military machine in history, it built the foundation for victory on a global scale. The legacy of American logistics endures as one of the most remarkable achievements in military history. By integrating industrial capacity, transport networks, planning, and human labor, the United States created a system capable of sustaining simultaneous global campaigns. This logistical prowess made victory possible, turning factories, railroads, ports, and convoys into instruments of strategic power. Every theater of war, from the deserts of North Africa to the islands of the Pacific, depended on this infrastructure. Forward depots, supply lines, and repair networks ensured that troops had the tools, fuel, and sustenance necessary to fight and endure. The success of amphibious operations, mechanized advances, and air campaigns was inseparable from the efficiency and adaptability of logistics. The human contribution was immense. Millions of workers, engineers, dockhands, and drivers ensured that industrial output became actionable combat power. Their labor, skill, and ingenuity transformed raw materials into operational capability, proving that logistics was powered as much by people as by technology. Innovation and adaptability were constant. Engineers and logisticians developed modular construction, standardized containers, mobile repair units, and predictive supply planning. These systems ensured that forces could operate in the most remote and hostile environments, sustaining combat operations over extended campaigns. Medical and food logistics preserved human life on a massive scale. Field hospitals, evacuation chains, and ration distribution allowed soldiers to survive injury, illness, and harsh conditions. Morale and operational effectiveness depended on these systems, reinforcing the critical human dimension of logistics. Strategic foresight and coordination created redundancy and resilience. Supply lines were protected, depots prepositioned, and contingency plans developed. This allowed commanders to conduct ambitious operations with confidence, knowing that logistical support could withstand disruption, enemy interference, or unforeseen challenges. The cumulative effect was decisive. Industrial capacity, transportation networks, human labor, and innovation converged to create a military machine capable of sustained global operations. Logistics was the invisible force that enabled the projection of power, the replacement of losses, and the execution of complex strategies across multiple theaters. In the end, the story of American logistics is the story of victory itself. Factories, ports, railroads, and convoys transformed industrial might into strategic advantage. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen fought effectively because they were supported by an extraordinary system that ensured they had everything needed to succeed. Logistics built not just the greatest military machine in history, it built the foundation for victory on a global scale. The legacy of American logistics endures as one of the most remarkable achievements in military history. By integrating industrial capacity, transport networks, planning, and human labor, the United States created a system capable of sustaining simultaneous global campaigns. This logistical prowess made victory possible, turning factories, railroads, ports, and convoys into instruments of strategic power. Every theater of war, from the deserts of North Africa to the islands of the Pacific, depended on this infrastructure. Forward depots, supply lines, and repair networks ensured that troops had the tools, fuel, and sustenance necessary to fight and endure. The success of amphibious operations, mechanized advances, and air campaigns was inseparable from the efficiency and adaptability of logistics. The human contribution was immense. Millions of workers, engineers, dockhands, and drivers ensured that industrial output became actionable combat power. Their labor, skill, and ingenuity transformed raw materials into operational capability, proving that logistics was powered as much by people as by technology. Innovation and adaptability were constant. Engineers and logisticians developed modular construction, standardized containers, mobile repair units, and predictive supply planning. These systems ensured that forces could operate in the most remote and hostile environments, sustaining combat operations over extended campaigns. Medical and food logistics preserved human life on a massive scale. Field hospitals, evacuation chains, and ration distribution allowed soldiers to survive injury, illness, and harsh conditions. Morale and operational effectiveness depended on these systems, reinforcing the critical human dimension of logistics. Strategic foresight and coordination created redundancy and resilience. Supply lines were protected, depots prepositioned, and contingency plans developed. This allowed commanders to conduct ambitious operations with confidence, knowing that logistical support could withstand disruption, enemy interference, or unforeseen challenges. The cumulative effect was decisive. Industrial capacity, transportation networks, human labor, and innovation converged to create a military machine capable of sustained global operations. Logistics was the invisible force that enabled the projection of power, the replacement of losses, and the execution of complex strategies across multiple theaters. In the end, the story of American logistics is the story of victory itself. Factories, ports, railroads, and convoys transformed industrial might into strategic advantage. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen fought effectively because they were supported by an extraordinary system that ensured they had everything needed to succeed. Logistics built not just the greatest military machine in history, it built the foundation for victory on a global scale.